Okay, Niklas, take it away, sir, and introduce the audience to your world.
Yeah, hello. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, I'm happy to be on the show today.
I'm happy to have you. So, File Stage has been going for about almost a decade now, 9 years, something along those lines.
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. Yeah.
How has the company evolved over the course of almost a decade?
Yeah. Sounds quite a long time now that you say it. But yeah, I think it all just started with the three founders. I think the official start was around 2015, right? And back then, basically, we had no money, but just a big idea, so to say. So you have to know that we were all coming from the marketing and film industry originally. And back then, I mean, especially my co-founder produced a lot of video content for different clients, and then producing content was his thing, and basically a couple of hundred content pieces. And also I used to work in marketing. Wow. But once you had this content, you always ran into this process where you had to send this stuff to the clients, and then it was immediately like this email ping pong thing, back and forth, back and forth. And by the end of the week, he was like super frustrated every time and said, okay, I spent 50% on communication, and it's so unstructured, and I just want to produce good content. And I mean, you have to know that we're all kind of workflow guys at the same time. And so we said, hey, why isn't there a good software tools? 2015 should be possible. And then we did some research and found out, no, there's nothing out there to do video commenting and approval. And this is how we started. So, and then basically before we even built anything, we went out, had 30, 40 interviews with marketeers, with people working advertising, with film producers. Just asked them, how do you communicate? How do you work? How do you share files? All that stuff. And then based on that, we developed the entire idea and the first version of our platform. And then we launched like the beta basically. And then we continuously like asked for feedback and said, okay, what's shit about the platform still? What do you like? What do you want? And step by step, we developed it into something. Let's say that was able to produce the first revenue, win the first real customers. And at that time, we were still completely running with working students, interns, nothing really big. And then from there, we somehow managed to get the first seed round before some business angel investment to really, let's say, keep us running. Yeah, and that was a bit like the early journey. And today we have over 700 customers worldwide, lots of big brands using it. Lots of agencies still using it, so I'm quite happy. And then also we have 50 people in the meantime working at File Stage. So quite a journey.
Yeah. So problem that you guys are solving is essentially whether you're an agency or a marketing team, you're spending so much of your time just getting approval for content or testimonials or whatever it is, right? And from the client, is that and basically you guys have created a platform to make that really seamless and efficient?
Exactly. I think you should work for us. You can promote it well. So what I always say is, yeah, maybe.
Is that an offer?
Yeah. Let's talk later. Not in public. So what we always say, we say basically we fill the gap in the tech stack, in the marketing tech stack. Between content creation and content publication, basically. So everything that happens between your Adobe and where you produce content, and what happens finally once you publish the stuff on social media or a website or wherever. And what we learned is just like the review and approval part, no matter if it's a video, if it's a website, is it a PDF, an Office doc, it's just a nightmare. So people still depend on email and chat and spreadsheets, and it feels like not 2023. It feels like most companies still operate like they're in the 90s with just this. But the content production part is super good. And also the performance side and analytics part is like, whoa, perfect. But everything in between is no. And this is where we attack. Yeah.
So what role does automation play in all of this versus technology and efficiency?
I think automation is a key part nowadays. but I think it's not the starting point normally. So to explain a bit better, I think usually the initial problem that we solved was super simple. People produced a video and just wanted to have feedback within the frame. So with FiStage, you can watch the video and then click in the video and just mark your comments there, right? It's visual. And that was the main part. So just having a precise way to give feedback in an async way. So no need to meet for a meeting. That's the other thing that we prevent with FiStage. So we significantly reduce the number of meetings that you have to really get content approvals done. And also at the same time, we document everything that happens on the fly. So let's say somebody's commenting on it, it's completely documented. You upload a new version to it, it's documented. By the end, you have a really nice report of everything that happened. And that's, let's say, the first part of it. So we organize your review and approval process in a better way. And that's the part one, very basic, but this already helps you to reduce a lot of time spent basically and increase like the time to produce stuff a lot. So normally like 3 times faster than when you don't use it. But then the second step, once you have built this, you can go into automation. And I think this is where it becomes really interesting, especially if you work with many different stakeholders. So one agency, 20 different brands, or one brand with lots of vendors and different departments that need to talk to each other. Then you can work like rule-based and say, okay, if marketing department has approved this file, then please automatically send it into the next step, inform legal, give them a deadline of 3 days, remind them if they don't do anything within 3 days, and give me a Slack notification the moment the first one has approved it. So automations like that, for us, is like the key thing to really improve it. Yeah.
So how do you handle data security, privacy, things like that for your customers? Because I can imagine, especially over international relationships and international customers, that's extremely important.
Yeah. I think what helped us here is that we're coming from the German market where everybody is super paranoid about data and privacy and everything. And maybe you heard about that.
Maybe. Yeah.
So within the first days, basically, of FiStage, we were already confronted with it. And obviously, honestly, as a founder, you feel first like, okay, not something that's fun at the beginning. But anyway, it really trained us to become really, really good. So for us, it's like, let's say it's enterprise best practice to really follow all security best practice that are possible. Of course, it's GDPR compliant from day one, all those things that were super important. And at the same time, I think you need to be secure. And that's otherwise, I mean, if you are not a secure platform that does everything to protect the data of your customers, you have a problem, especially in the enterprise field. But at the same time, I think it needs to be convenient. So yes, you can have a hyper compliant platform and super secure, but at the end, if it's so complicated, nobody wants to use it, right, then you have a problem. And I think this is the key to really make sure it's convenient but still secure. So, yeah.
So how do you do that?
On the one side, try to, let's say, just show what's really important to the user. So let's say when you start with FiStage, don't give them all the information at once. Don't give them 3 billion options to change. And by default, just give them the best options they can have. And then for the experienced users, offer them possibilities to adjust it in their way they want to. So for example, by default, every link you share is maybe password protected. But for the ones that are more advanced and say, hey, my data is not so critical, I don't want passwords, it's easier, they can turn it off. So stuff like this, I think, like this is I think is key.
Yeah. When you think about the trends in your industry and where things are going, what's going on that's going to, like, what are the industry trends that are going to be impacting your market?
A couple of trends, definitely. So we just recently run a really nice study and report ourselves where we surveyed like 400 marketeers roundabout and asked them, okay, how do you collaborate? How do you work? Stuff like that. So on the one side, we see the bigger trends, right? There's a trend back to the office and hybrid work. But at the same time, the interesting fact was that even though now around 70% or so have hybrid work and go to the office to work, they still by 80% collaborate digitally. So everybody goes to the office, sits in front of their computer, and then so interesting thing.
Yeah.
Really eye-opening. I think that's one bigger trend. I think that's impacting more like everybody. Then on the marketing field, we see like still content production is an ongoing trend. So even companies spend more and more time really to produce content. Of course, a lot more video content. Ongoing trend. And then all what you mentioned, AI trend, I think is plus automation plus integrations. I think this is the sweet spot. So yes, you want to automate processes, but normally when you buy a software today, you also want to make sure it fits perfectly well in your tech stack already. So it needs to integrate. And then last but not least, we basically proactively work on stuff where we support you and not doing all the manual things yourself. So an example, you have a contract and you negotiate a contract with a third party. Then there are multiple versions of your contract and you share the first one. And then the second version, you basically have some changes in it, right? So there's a change log. And what we offer, for example, as functionality right now is to give you an auto detection of all the changes between the different versions. And you automatically see, hey, the third party here, they did not tell you, but by the way, in paragraph 2, they changed something here. Watch out. And this is just one early example what you can do. And I mean, what we're working on is also stuff like making sure if an agency delivers content to you, let's say a campaign, a new brochure, that it's in line with your brand guidelines. Today, there's a marketing or brand manager sitting there every Friday checking, hey, is the logo right? Is the font right? We just say, okay, there's an AI checking it automatically for you and detecting anything that is like not in line with your brand guidelines. So examples like this, I think we will see more of that this year, but especially, of course, like 24, 25 again.
Yeah. So you guys you're up above 50 employees now, you mentioned, right? You guys are growing well, hiring well. And when you think about how you got here, because it's obvious it wasn't like a 6-month journey, right? It doesn't happen quite like that. What are some of the pitfalls, some of the obstacles, the dirt, if you will, that you experienced along the way that you look back and say is part of the reason you got here?
I think there's many things where let's say over the years where I feel like, okay, I struggled at the beginning and then overcome the challenge and now it's good. Just to list a couple and maybe you can pick what's interesting, but I know for a long time we haven't had a proper finance and accounting team or anything. So every Friday night I was sitting there doing accounting and I hated it. Yeah, I think it's the early challenge, right? But then also before we had the seed round, financial pressure really like we knew like, okay, this month I need to close 5 new customers, otherwise we have a problem. Next month I need to close again to just have something to eat. So we were paying us $400 or something a month, so not a lot. Reliable marketing channels, crazy journey to really build something that is stable and producing leads every month and ideally growing every month without paying more. Building a founder independent sales team. That's something was really challenging, but that we have achieved now. So couple of things we can talk about, I think.
Yeah, just maybe one or two, right? Yeah, like every company. Well, let's start from where you started, because you mentioned it first for a reason. So fixing the whole financial accounting, right? You doing everything yourself. I imagine forecasting might have been a little bit of a mess. That never happens, right? Talk to me a little bit about where you were, what you learned from it, and how you got here now.
Yeah, so the way we shared like responsibilities in the company early on, I mean, 3 founders, one has a technical background, is like software engineer. The other one is more coming, like I said, from the advertising video industry. And there's also a design background. So that both are more on the product and technical side of things. And I, on the other side, managed marketing, sales, finance, those things at the beginning. And I mean, I studied economy and media business, but let's say it's not something I really enjoy, like to sit on accounting, right? So I knew some stuff, but not too many details. So for me, it was a side job, and I felt like every time I had to do it, I don't have time to close customers and work on marketing and sales. So, so over the time, of course, I became super efficient in terms of how fast and quickly I just did the job. But of course, it was also a bit error prone, and I spent a lot of money also on a tax accountant and things like that. And then I tried to start to fix it with part-time people that were also not fully trained on it, but just to say, okay, I don't want to spend cash on it. It's just taking cash from me away, but I don't want to do it anymore. So I did that for a while, and obviously it did not really fix the problem. So it led to more issues over time. So every time I worked on a report, I recognized, oh, here's a mistake, or here's something. So by that, I had a moment, and the moment basically was because one of the business angels came at a certain moment in meeting and said, Niklas, I know you kind of maybe like analytics and numbers, but I think your accounting and reporting is not really good. Yeah. You should get somebody in. And then he luckily made an introduction to a part-time CFO. And it was our entry point that helped us at the beginning with the due diligence, and then later on became like a full part of FiStage. So at the beginning, he worked for 4 or 5 other companies, and then decided to go for us full time. And it was really kind of cool because, of course, we could afford him at the beginning, but over time already had like somebody that knew the company. So definitely one of the best things moving forward now, and freed up a lot of time.
Yeah, so you're not the one doing all the books on the weekend anymore, sounds like.
Yeah, now I'm doing other stuff at the weekend.
Yeah, good. So, all right, so that covers that finance accounting bucket, which I think a lot of people can resonate with. You also mentioned building reliable marketing channels. What does that mean to you?
On the one side, it connects strongly with the forecasting thing. So the moment you have a sales team in place that needs leads, you need to have kind of some predictability. So if you have, let's say, every month, like 1 month, a lot of leads, 1 month, no leads, third month, some leads, some doesn't work. So I think that's the one part, to deliver like a constant stream of leads, also more or less with the same quality. That's reliability. And then I think on the other side, it's about how do you make sure you can scale that? So how do you make sure it becomes more over time, right? Because if you don't scale the leads, normally you cannot really scale the revenue to a certain extent. So that was the second condition. And then also, I think what we also realized, I mean, not every marketing channel that maybe seems reliable at the beginning is something that you can scale or continue for a long time. So also something I learned on the journey.
Yeah. So what would be an example of that?
I think let's say one of the early things we did back then when Facebook was still quite new and big. Today, let's debate. I personally went into a lot of Facebook groups, for example, and just said, hey, I'm a founder. I have this really nice tool here, beta. And I went into all kind of film producer groups worldwide and just asked them if they want to test it out and give me feedback. And that's how we won the first couple of 100 subscribers, basically. But of course, there are just 50 or 100 groups, and then it's saturated, and then you have the next. Or paid advertising, Google AdWords. There's maybe just a volume of, I don't know, you can maybe get, let's say, 50 new leads or customers a month from a certain keyword set, and there isn't more. So also budget limits, of course. So those are typical examples, I think, that we have seen over time. Yeah.
Sure. The ROI starts to not even out if you pour too much fuel on the fire, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It can really lead to detrimental effects. That's a great point. So Something else that you mentioned around company culture. I'll just leave it at that and let you kind of talk about company culture and your lessons learned there.
So I think the story I always tell is that at the beginning, I thought company culture is really something you find in a management textbook at university.
Yeah.
And it's like theory and blah, blah. And it's really like the last thing you need to care about in a startup. It's like, come on, let's all work together and have a good time, and then everything's good. Today, I would say I was completely wrong with that and ignorant maybe also. So over time, I learned a lot about that. But today, I would say it's the number one thing that defines our company. It's really like the company culture. It's where it all starts and where things work out or not. And I mean, with software, at the end, you also have to face basically the truth. Software business is people business. So you don't have any machines. Software you use to produce software normally is not that expensive. So the biggest cost you have, but also the biggest assets are people. And people basically work together. They have issues, they have personal issues, whatever. So it's all about culture. You need to define basically how you want to work together and really take care of it like for a baby, really. And that was, again, a big eye opener for me to really shape the company culture in a proactive way.
So let's fast forward to the future when you're growing and scaling your next company after a massive exit at File Stage, of course. What are you doing differently the next time around?
So I think on the one side, I personally learned a lot about, I mean, I can be quite open. I'm more like maybe output and task oriented than people oriented by heart. So that's a bit like my trade. So I had to learn a bit like on the other side of things. That's also super important. That's just me personally. And I think I'm a lot more aware of this now. That helps. But then practically, what we have in place right now, and that's something I would do from the beginning with the next companies. Every time we hire somebody new, it's already in the job description, basically. The culture is already, let's say, visible in the job description. And also whenever we do any kind of employer branding stuff, or when you try to discover something about FiSage and how we work, it's visible somehow about our culture. But then once you apply, we have a interview process, 3 steps. Normally it's like the first, let's say, we check each other out interview. Then we have a technical interview where we go a lot about the details about your skills. And then there's the last interview that's just about culture. And that's normally from somebody else than the original department that's hiring. So if marketing is hiring, maybe somebody from the development is running the cultural interview. And this is the most critical one. And there we really, on the one side, share our values and really give them examples in how we work and how we solve problems. But at the same time, we really try to find out how they want to work, how they want to communicate, what's important to them. Do we have the right fit here? Because I think if this doesn't match, you have a lot of stress later on and frustration.
Right. No, that's a great point. So when you think of the 3 things that define what you want people to think of as the culture of File Stage, what are those?
On the one side, we always say we are a feedback company. So said at the beginning, we had lots of interviews with potential customers. That's something as an ongoing thing externally. So whenever we produce a new feature, you can be sure that we had already a lot of feedback sessions before and asked them to see like mockups for the new feature and give us feedback. And that's how we learn. That's how we improve from external people. But also within the company, we try to really have a feedback culture where we say it's totally fine to give feedback to each other and ask for feedback, but also be very open to get feedback as long as it's like helpful feedback and not nasty feedback that tries to pull you down, right? So we also have a saying that we always assume the best intentions if somebody is approaching us in the company, right? And that helps a lot. I also say sometimes I want people, and that's something I became aware of pretty late, that people start to see me as the CEO, and therefore also maybe don't share openly their feedback. And that's what I really try to push, like, give me feedback, give me hard feedback. And I think that I reached that point where people really give me open feedback, and that helps. So feedback. Then second one is ownership. So we are a remote company. So I think it just works with full ownership. So we cannot work with people that need to be micromanaged and just need super clear instructions every day, and otherwise they don't move, right? It's all about take your ownership, take your responsibility. Then it's a palace and a paradise where you can work, and otherwise it's not the right thing for you. And then the other big one is asking why and giving context. So on the one side, if you want something from somebody, try to give them as much context as you can. So I think, if you give a task to somebody in the team and they don't know the bigger thing behind it and just see the task, they will just perform it on that level. But if they know why we are doing it and the bigger picture and have the full context, then they can do a really good job and maybe come up with something that you never expected could be a solution. And that's why I think this is so important to share context and empower people. Yeah.
So feedback, ownership, and context. Those
are the three main things, and then we have three other things.
Oh yeah, let's keep going. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm learning so much.
Yeah. I mean, the last thing is team player. I mean, it's obvious, but it's really about that. So if we party any success, it's mostly about the team, and not like, hey, this person is great. So it's more like, okay, the team together achieved stuff. Excellent communicators. Again, remote culture. What we learned over time, nothing just happens communication-wise. So it's not like in the office, right, where you meet in the coffee kitchen or where you have lunch together and then you just share information like that. It just flows in a small team. Doesn't happen. So you really need to be explicit about how you communicate and what you share. So we really build a culture where, for example, we use Slack internally, where we have different channels, of course, but let's say marketing once a week or so writes an update about, hey, this is what we have done this week. Those are the results. So that everybody else is in the loop and can then relate to it, right? Or when we work on projects, we constantly give like written updates, or what we really like to do is like to record small, let's take Loom videos. There are also other tools where you can screen share your stuff. Record those videos and then share it, and then async somebody else can watch it a day later, but has the full context. So that's why we really think we need to be smart about communication. Again, it ties in really well to ownership part and feedback part and all that. And then the last thing is like knowledge seeker plus problem solver. So we want people that at a certain point bite into a problem, and let's say Friday night you figure out you're the last one in and there's a bug. Do you go home and let it stick like that and say, oh, Monday I'm out of office, interesting, somebody else will deal with it? Or you're gonna fix it, right? Right. So again, it ties into ownership, but super important one. And so this is kind of our DNA. Yeah.
Well, it's no wonder why you guys have been able to hire well when you clearly have an understanding of what you want in your DNA. That's great. So when you think about decision making as a team, right, and informing that decision making, obviously these rules of engagement or culture or values, however we want to characterize them, play an important role. But what role does data play in making decisions for you guys?
I think it's a core part of what we do is to try to have on the one side the right data and be clear about the tracking. So obviously also learning curve. How at the beginning as a company you're not so organized with data and how you track stuff and everything. It's also a challenge. Yeah. And I know from many other founders in my network, it's still a challenge. And for us, we're on a good level, but it's still something that we can improve. But anyway, so the more customers you have, the more data sources you also have available. And for example, let's say we want to run a new pricing initiative. that's something we now do as a group, and where we look at a lot of data points. So that was something that we just recently launched a free plan, by the way. And this is mainly based on data. Also launched like a plan for small companies, really affordable, also based on data. In a nutshell, we looked at many different quantitative data points that we collected over time. So for example, what is the company size of a lead? How many leads? What regions are they coming from? Plus, let's say, qualitative data, insights from customer success, sales, from demos, reconversations, and then try to plug it all together. On the other side, I think the difficulty with data is you never have enough data to have a complete decision. There's always like, how do you interpret certain things, and how do you deal with, okay, let's look at the 80% and then be fine with the last 20%. I think it's often better to look at data, take an informed decision, and then run an experiment, and take this data again and adopt what you have there at the beginning, rather than trying to be perfect with the first shot. So that's also something I learned over time.
Yeah, no, that's good. So this new free plan and new plan for SMBs, is that connected to some of the research that you did in that research study? Is that what identified some of those needs, or how, do those things connect in any way?
No, for this was kind of independent. So basically, we were already working on the pricing stuff. The other survey now is really interesting, let's say, for the content we produce going forward. So we also learned about like what kind of content shall we have on the website, on the product, on the blog. But for the pricing, basically, was mainly the information we collected from let's say the lead onboarding process. So what kind of information do they fill in? Then from the HubSpot data we had, plus from website visitor data we had. So those were all kind of points we looked at, plus the customers that came in and bought versus the customers basically that maybe started something but never bought from us. And there was a significant gap with certain people, plus again, like sales coming back and say, hey, there are so many companies that want it, but it's not their price range and they're too small for this. So we leave them on the table. Okay. And that's why we went for it. Yeah.
All right. Last question before we hop into and close this out with our Founder 5 today. So right before we do that, I got one more question around the trends of the industry that kind of ties some of this stuff together. So when you think of what the future looks like, call it 5-10 years down the road, you pick, what is going to be shaping the future of this industry? What does it look like down the road?
Really tough question.
Well, make sure you're right, because otherwise I'm
going
to be
make sure
you're
right. It's recorded. I personally think on the one side we just are at the beginning of something quite crazy to happen. I think what we see there with AI and chatbot that really just peaked it, I think for me is comparable to the beginning of the internet. So I think it's not just for our industry, but just think about how Google works today, and then think about how many businesses depend on Google in terms of producing advertising or getting traffic via advertising or getting traffic via SEO, and producing content basically to rank for Google. Now take that away and say everybody suddenly is just using a chatbot and doesn't need to really search manually. Then you have a big change. And then combine that with maybe what happens on social media recently, that maybe it's not human content anymore, but just like, let's say, artificial content. And then I think you have a really interesting combination that marketeers in our industry need to face. So, I mean, at the end, it's all about how do you sell your stuff and how do you reach your target audience? What is the right way to do it in an efficient way, right? And I think this is the main thing I'm looking at right now. Plus, I think we just see software-wise, we're still just let's say, starting somewhere. I think in future it's even more software tools. It's even more integrated all together. I think, many businesses today just understood that they can solve most of their manual problems with software. So I think in the next couple of years, I mean, we had it during COVID. But I think still there's so much potential for software growth overall. And there are so many solutions on the table where we just don't understand yet that we will need them in 2 years. But in 2 years, you will think, hey, why haven't we thought about it before?
So, that's how it always goes, right? It's the way of cycles. Awesome. So, all right, let me close things off here with our founder 5. So, first question, number 1 metric or KPI that you are relentlessly focused on?
I have 2.
Cool.
It's monthly active users and MRR. Yeah.
Monthly recurring revenue, monthly active users.
Yes.
You seem like a by the month kind of guy, maybe, huh?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. Second one is top tip for growth stage founders like yourself.
Monitor your marketing and sales spendings quite closely from the beginning, because it's super easy to overspend and, let's say, be trapped into something that's not 100% driving results. So that's something I would really closely monitor. And the other thing, don't miss the point where you should hire professional people and switch from interns, working students, part-time people. I think we did that too late or were too cautious. So definitely consider to invest in 1, 2, 3 really good people from the beginning rather than have 10 interns.
Yeah. All right. Favorite book or podcast that's helped you to grow as a founder?
My favorite book, all-time favorite book, is The Ultimate Sales Machine from Chet Holmes. I love it. Old but gold. Read it a couple of times. It teaches you a hell of things about self-organization and structure first, and say this is the foundation, and second, how to really sell and build a pitch and everything. So great book. Yeah.
Old is the new gold. I love it. Love it. All right. Piece of advice that counters traditional wisdom.
Piece of advice that counters. I'm a bit blank here. Sorry.
Well, you've said a few of them, so you want me to just throw one out there based on what I believe you believe?
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, maybe you can help me out.
Well, I think it is traditional wisdom that you should hire, cheap in your early days, and there's some truth to getting interns and some folks to do some tasks and some labor, but at the end of the day, having a couple key people that are all stars and paying up for them can make all the difference in the company. So I'm going to go ahead and use that one as your traditional wisdom too. How about that?
Perfect. I like it. I can add one if you like.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
I think personally, let's say, don't think that with money everything becomes easier. So I think that's the thing. Many people think, they think, hey, suddenly when I have money, then suddenly all the leads will come in. And
sure.
No, nope. I think solve your problems first, and then when you solve kind of your problems, then take money on top to make it even faster, solve it even faster, but not like think about I have a problem and if I have money, then the problem is solved. Ain't gonna happen, I think.
Yeah, I think there might have been a rapper called the Notorious B.I.G. that used to say "More money, more problems." Ain't that the truth?
I think definitely there's something in it.
It's amazing how many similarities there are to rap into building a business. But we'll talk about that in the next one. All right, so closing us off here with one last question: what is going to be the title of your autobiography when all is said and done?
No pain, no gain.
No pain, no gain, no money, no more money, more problems. How about that?
And that's a good one. Let's take it.
Cool. Well, Niklas, this has been awesome, man. You've given so much to our listeners today. Time for a little bit of self-promotion. How can those listening help you out?
So I think everybody that's working in the agency world, advertising, marketing, content production, whenever you face this problem of review and approving content and you search for a solution, then go to the 5Stage website. We now have a free plan in place, also free trial. So I think there's really no reason why you shouldn't use 5Stage to share and approve your files. And then just spread the word. So that's, I think, what I'm hoping the most for, of course. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I will. I'm going to try it out myself. How about that?
That sounds really nice.
Everyone else follows suit. All right.
Perfect.
Sounds
Awesome.
good, Nick. This has been great, man. Thank you so much. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
Definitely LinkedIn. I'm super active on LinkedIn. Yeah.
Perfect. All right, Niklas Dorn, everyone. Thanks for joining us on The Dirt.
Thanks for having me. Really nice.